Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira, on Rajya Sabha television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events to have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. As the Paris Climate Change Conference comes to a close, agreement aside, a wider call for development to work in tandem and balance with protecting nature, with the dark consequences of violations more than visible. FBI says the husband-wife duo that sprayed bullets on a community gathering has long been radicalized into terror by the Islamic State. The attack reopens the debate on correcting gun laws in the US. US Republican frontrunner in the presidential race, Donald Trump's latest xenophobic outburst. This time, he says all Muslims should be kept outside US borders to stop terror. Faces never before anger and ridicule. And the Taliban militia storm Afghanistan's Kandahar airport, killing dozens, even as ironically the Heart of Asia conference on the violence-racked nations calls for toss as the only way to usher in peace. Well, our top story this week. It's been nearly 2 weeks of intense negotiations and some strong brickbats at the climate change conference in Paris. Amid this frequent war of words over developed and developing, privileged and underprivileged, there's a deeper, wider question that touches all of mankind. Are we doing enough to protect brutalized nature? Here's a report.
Green activists demonstrate on the River Seine in Paris on the sidelines of the Climate Change Conference, pointing out that the tussle among global political representatives has to go beyond political and economic benefit and stay aligned to man and nature and the intense bond between the two.
Indigenous peoples know how to maintain this balance with Mother Earth. We've lost touch with the natural world. We've lost touch with the natural way the world unfolds.
I'm carrying the next generation. They're begging for a change. The question is, when are we ready? When are we really ready to truly make that change? There is no time left.
The last 2 weeks of the Paris Climate Change Conference have also been about just this call to action, urging the power holders to reach an agreement that is strong, that holds out long-term corrective impact, one that overrides the conflict between rich and poor, developed and developing nations, privileged and unprivileged societies. Stumbling blocks arising in the last leg of the meet revolved around money, funding from rich nations to poor ones to help them adapt to climate change, while accommodating financial commitments. Successive drafts were built on narrowing differences and reaching out to humanity and nature.
The message has to go out that this is not an economic exercise for states or parties to make money on. You know, it's really the life of our people, and it's up to us to be responsible.
It comes down to differentiation, ambition, support. How much difference will there be in how and what different countries, the obligations different countries have developing versus developed in terms of what they're expected to do, how they're expected to report on it. Ambition, how ambitious will the agreement be? How do we ratchet up ambition over time? And support on finance, how much money and in what forms should money come?
The effects, fast blazing out of human control, are there for all to see. Rapid deforestation, expanding carbon emissions that have resulted in record natural disasters, calamity-causing weather patterns, flood and drought, toxicity and shortage, Beijing's pollution, Australia's forest fires, Chennai's floods, Africa's droughts, they all come to mind, with efforts to calm damage already done proving uphill.
I think this year, in fact, could provide a snapshot of what much of the future could look like in places like California in terms of fire activity. And it was probably due to the drought. And because the drought is both a temperature and a precipitation-related phenomenon, a lot of people are pointing to this as an indication of what climate change could bring us.
Beyond agreements on cutting emissions and who'll pay for it, there's more writing on the wall. Protect the environment, let development be balanced by nature's well-being. or else. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Well, joining me for a chat this week to talk about this is Gopal Krishna, environmentalist. Thank you so much, Gopal Krishna, for joining me on the program. Do you believe that enough is being done to save our environment? Because in the last few years, we've seen, several natural calamities that have taken place, not just here in India, but all around the world that have been attributed to climate change. So are we doing enough?
There are two things. One is action on the ground, and the other is legal commitments to take those actions. The talks which are about to conclude, it has almost concluded. I think in Paris, the negotiation timing has been extended. But what is being discussed is to have an international law. And when international laws are created or national laws are created when there is a crisis. In this context, it is climate crisis, and it is also a crisis which has emerged because of injustice which has been done by rich countries. The rich countries which colonized during the Industrial Revolution till recent times, the concentration of carbon in the atmosphere is the contribution of the rich countries. We keep in the climate negotiations, it's the core issue is justice. Whether justice will be done to the aggrieved parties from the poorer countries. Whether or not the international law which is under negotiation addresses it, that is the core issue. And it can address it only by taking concrete action. As of now, text is being discussed. Actions which will be written in the text, those actions have not been inspiring, because we have seen how implementation of Kyoto Protocol happened. The rich countries did not deliver. Also, the way non-parties to Kyoto Protocol like USA, the way they diluted Kyoto Protocol in the first instance and then introduced market-driven solutions as solutions for climate crisis, the fate of Kyoto Protocol, the way it has been implemented, shows that market solutions are not working. The fraud of carbon trade has been exposed. And the climate treaty, the draft climate treaty, which is to be finalized in the next couple of hours, I think, in Paris, it will have to reflect on how market solutions have failed. Indeed. And therefore, public finance, public institutions, government-run institutions have to intervene. The key polluters are not an abstract called nation state. The key polluters are companies which have caused this pollution.
I want to draw your attention to something that one of those people on those sound bites said. She said, there is no time left. Now, that is very crucial, isn't it, what she said? And also, what I want to ask you is, damage has already been done. Is that damage reversible now?
The damages can be undone, but the first step required for undoing the damage is stop doing the damage. You cannot go on damaging and then say that we are talking about undoing the damage. The first step required is stop doing the damage. The draft text of the climate treaty which has been circulated, the last one, 9th December one, refer to two very critical things which merit attention. It refers to Mother Earth. It refers to terrestrial ecosystem. If it is recognized that our ecosystem is a living entity, it's not material flow, then the sensitivity required by negotiators, by nation states, by institutions of profit, which is corporations, unless they show the sensitivity required towards Mother Earth, I think whatever they are doing is paying lip service.
Talking about sensitivity, one thing that no one has talked about is the wars that are taking place around the world and how much of an impact it really has on the environment.
Yeah, this is very important. Good that you mentioned it. Whenever conversations about pollution and contamination happen, it appears that these are polite conversations. These are polite words, pollution and contamination. These are polite words for war unleashed on ecosystem, war unleashed on human body. The concentration in atmosphere, the carbon concentration in atmosphere is, it sounds technical. The fact is, it's an act of war against atmosphere. So I think the seriousness with which this war against ecosystem, the war against human body is to be combated, that seriousness is not nowhere visible.
Indeed.
Yeah, in fact, it is, I think some procedural responses are being given. Substantive responses are missing.
And that's what we want to see, and we hope we get to see that in the coming days, and that's carried forward as well, so that we have a better world to live in. Thank you so much, Gopal Krishna, for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, it's time for a short break now. Still to come, the US-led coalition carrying out airstrikes against the Islamic State in Syria, and Iraq claims a major victory, the killing of the IS finance chief. We'll have that and lots more on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. Well, 1 week after the horrific San Bernardino shooting in the United States, the FBI probe has revealed deeper links between the killer couple and the Islamic State terrorists in Syria, besides uncovering their preparations ahead of the attacks. And like many others, this gun incident too has reopened the debate around gun laws in the US.
The Inland Regional Center, the gun target practice range in San Bernardino that Rizwan Farouk and his wife Tashfeen Malik actually used in days before they went on the shooting spree at a gathering of country workers in the same town. After over 300 interviews and dozens of searches, the FBI probe into the now established Islamist terror attack focuses on the attackers' IS links and contacts they may have had with radical Islamists within the United States, and the length and process of radicalizing them.
They were actually radicalized before they started courting or dating each other online. And online, as early as the end of 2013, they were talking to each other about jihad and martyrdom before they became engaged and then married and lived together in the United States.
Also being probed, the Pakistani link. Authorities are talking to Saudi Arabia on Farouk and Malik's lives before they moved to the United States, and they're coming into contact with the Islamic State. Even as this attack marks a big step in America's war against the Islamic State, attention also shifts again to the gun culture within the US, absence of sufficient checks to owning and keeping a lethal weapon. Over 300 incidents around guns have happened in the country last year. The issue has shaken up citizens, pushing for corrective legislative action.
I think they need to really do something about that. Anybody off the street can go get a gun, and that's just not right. I mean, they say people kill people, guns don't kill people. If the guns weren't available, we wouldn't have the problem.
It's another tragic reminder that here in America, it's way too easy for dangerous people to get their hands on a gun. For example, right now, people on the no-fly list can walk into a store and buy a gun. That's insane. If you're too dangerous to board a plane, you're too dangerous by definition to buy a gun. And so I'm calling on Congress to close this loophole now. We may not be able to prevent every tragedy, but at a bare minimum, we shouldn't be making it so easy for potential terrorists or criminals to get their hands on a gun that they could use against Americans.
As the country comes together to condemn the Islamist terror attack, fears arise of a hate backlash against the Muslim community. Vigils for the dead held by Muslims in the US and efforts from social groups, politicians and investigators look to stem that. The most immediate challenge perhaps lies there. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
So where sensible humanity speaks of stopping hate crime and keeping terror and religion apart, here's an individual who has actually set off new fires. US presidential candidate Donald Trump actually speaks of stopping all Muslims from entering the US as his prescription to checking terror. Expectedly enough, the idea itself has met with a resounding barrage of outright condemnation.
This is both a shameless and a dangerous idea.
What Donald Trump said yesterday disqualifies him from serving as president. And for Republican candidates for president to stand by their pledge to support Mr. Trump, that in and of itself is disqualifying.
And we are concerned that the rhetoric that is being used in the election campaign is putting an incredibly important resettlement program at risk.
The barrage of not new criticism for the Maverick, though there's no denying, it won him points on the populism chart. Listen in to the latest Donald Trump xenophobic outburst.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Notice the timing. Hours after a poll showing that fellow Republican presidential candidate Ted Cruz had overtaken him for the lead in Iowa, and a day after US President Obama's rare Oval Office address to discuss fears of terrorism after the attacks in Paris and San Bernardino, a speech Republicans criticized as insufficiently reassuring. Understandably, the Muslim population within America and outside is particularly unhappy.
Donald Trump sounds more like a leader of a lynch mob than a great nation like ours. He and others are playing into the hands of ISIS. This rhetoric echoes the policies enacted by Nazi Germany against the Jews. Have we learned anything from history, Mr. Trump?
Going with the populist applause, some political leaders have chosen to go it soft on Trump, at least for now. Fellow Republican Cruz even praised Trump on his stand on closing borders.
Let's now take a look at some other news-making events that made headlines across the world this week in Globe Watch.
The US military claims the finance chief of the Islamic State has been killed in an airstrike by the coalition it heads in Syria. A spokesperson said Muwafaq Mustafa Mohammad al-Karmosh, also known as Abu Saleh, and two other senior leaders were killed in the airstrikes which took place in recent weeks. Abu Saleh was named as one of the most senior and experienced members of the militant group's financial network. The coalition has been carrying out airstrikes against IS militants in Iraq and Syria for over a year. One recently also killed an IS leader in Libya. The 2015 Nobel Prize Award ceremony was held at the Stockholm Concert Hall in Sweden on Thursday. Nobel Awards this year for physics, chemistry, medicine, literature and economics were officially received by the laureates named earlier this year. The Tunisian National Dialogue Quartet were recipients of the Nobel Peace Prize for their decisive contribution to the building of a pluralistic democracy in the country in the wake of the Jasmine Revolution in 2011. They received the award in Oslo. The awards have been presented to laureates at ceremonies at Stockholm and Oslo every year since 1901. Time magazine named German Chancellor Angela Merkel its 2015 Person of the Year. The board noted her resilience and leadership when faced with the Syrian refugee crisis and turmoil in the European Union over its currency this year. Merkel, elected to her position in 2005, has been called the most powerful politician on the planet and is the first woman to lead Germany. She is the first individual woman to win the title in 29 years. Mauricio Macri took office on Thursday as Argentina's first non-Peronist president in 16 years, ending more than a decade of leftist populism with a promise to review the South American country's ailing economy. Macri began his 4-year term in a ceremony snubbed by his predecessor, Cristina Fernandez, following a spat over where the handover of power should take place. A 20-member cabinet also took oath, some who have worked with Macri, others in the process of transition from the last government's administration to this one.
Well, even as the Heart of Asia Conference on Afghanistan decided talks were the only way forward for the war-ravaged nation, Taliban militants stormed one of the country's most highly protected airport bases, the complex in the southern Afghan city of Kandahar, and also seized a key district. Dozens were killed, including civilians and army men. coming across as the Taliban way of underlining a strong presence and an uphill battle yet.
Yet another effort at pushing the reset button for war-ravaged Afghanistan. Leaders and ministers of 14 member countries of the Heart of Asia initiative, besides 17 supporting nations and organizations, met in Islamabad, Pakistan, looking to find a solution to years of mayhem. As Afghanistan pointed out geostrategic reasons, intended or unintended, for its suffering.
Al-Qaeda, Daesh, and terrorists from China, Russia, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, the Middle East, are all unfortunately present on our soil. The courageous decision of Prime Minister Sharif to launch the military actions in Pakistan has created unintended consequences, bringing about the displacement of a significant number of these groups onto our soil.
The Islamabad declaration called on all parties to enter into talks. Afghanistan even sought help from its eastern neighbor to help revive stalled talks with the Taliban.
We have all agreed, Afghanistan agrees, that the surest way to peace, stability in Afghanistan is through negotiations and talks. And we welcome all those opposition elements who renounce violence, who accept Afghanistan's constitution, and who disarm and join the government-led peace and reconciliation process.
The irony couldn't be more glaring. If it was peace talks in corridors of power, it was quite something else in Afghanistan on the ground. Taliban militia raided Kandahar airport Tuesday, laying siege, gaining the upper hand over security forces. At least 37 were killed before things were brought under control. Many were civilians, dozens were injured. The assault on one of the country's most heavily protected airports was meant to send out a strong message: the Taliban's ability to strike at will and inflict serious damage too. Taliban violence has bubbled in Afghanistan through the last year. In May, 2 months after the US announced an extension for its troops, the Taliban killed 16 soldiers in the northeastern region. Later that same month, the Taliban and Afghan government held the first round of peace talks in Qatar. They agreed to meet again, but it didn't happen. In July, a suicide blast near the CIA office in Khost killed 35. The next month, the Taliban came down hard on Kabul. Multiple blasts in a single day killed 35, injuring hundreds. The deadliest day in Kabul since the end of the NATO combat mission in December. In September, Taliban forces captured the strategic Kunduz town from the government. It was retaken with US support, but there's no missing out on the loss of face. And now this, with insurgents also gaining a foothold in a district in Helmand province. A UN report said the Taliban insurgency has spread through more of Afghanistan this year than at any point since 2001. The UN assistance mission evacuated several of its offices too. The latest attacks show the Taliban's continued ability to inflict damage, stepping up pressure on Ghani's government to contain the spreading insurgency. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Well, let's now shift focus and bring you up to speed with some sports news from around the world in our segment Sports Action. The International Cricket Council announced the groups and schedule of the ICC World T20, which will be staged across 8 venues in India from March 8 to April 3rd. A total of 58 tournament matches, including 35 men's matches and 23 women's matches, will be played in the 27-day tournament in Bengaluru, Chennai, Dharamshala, Kolkata, Mohali, Mumbai, Nagpur and New Delhi. New Delhi and Mumbai will host the semi-finals on the 30th and 31st of March respectively, while Eden Gardens in Kolkata will be the venue of the April 3rd finals. UEFA's embattled president Michel Platini failed to get his 90-day provisional suspension from football lifted after the Court of Arbitration for Sport denied his appeal on Friday. As a result of the ruling, the Frenchman was not allowed to attend the Euro 2016 draw in Paris. Besides him, FIFA President Sepp Blatter was also handed a provisional ban by the FIFA's Ethics Committee. Platini and Blatter will attend a hearing with the Ethics Committee judge Hans Joachim Eckert next week. Manager Louis van Gaal said facts proved his Manchester United side were better than last year after they were knocked out of the Champions League. United failed to qualify for the last 16 after a 3-2 defeat at Wolfsburg. Van Gaal said reaching the group stage, progressing further in the Capital One Cup and sitting fourth in the Premier League showed their improvement. Honduras international footballer Arnold Peralta has been shot dead in a parking lot area of a shopping mall in his hometown on the Caribbean coast. Confirming the news, police said in a statement that Peralta, who was on holiday following the conclusion of his club's season, was killed outside the Uniplaza Mall. They revealed that no suspects were in custody yet and that the motive of the killing was still unknown. World number 5, Rafael Nadal, has ruled out joining forces with Indian tennis great Leander Paes anytime soon, insisting that he is focusing entirely on the singles event. Nadal became Paes' 106th doubles partner when they partnered at Paris Masters, where they failed to cross the opening hurdle. One of the most successful professional Indian tennis players, Paes has accumulated 17 Grand Slams in the men's doubles and mixed doubles events over the last 16 years. And finally on the program, let's go to the World Air Games, the premier international multidiscipline air sports event consisting of 11 sports and 24 disciplines. The UAE hosted the event this year, creating some awe-inspiring images. I'm going to leave you with these visuals. See you again next time.